down his arm. I talked with Jesse, one of the carvers, and I says, that's when the crack was visible to the eye. They put gravel up here so they could have traction on it during the wintertime. Because the granite's really slick and smooth, and when they get ice on it and water, it's really slick. So for safety, they brought this gravel up here. Well, I asked him about that crack, and I says, is that a concern? He says, it is stable, it is attached, it probably would never fall off. But we don't want it to ever fall off. So what they did is they bored 1.5 inch holes in the mountain carving. They go at intervals like this, like you're stitching it together, just like a doctor would maybe pin an ankle or a hip or something. And in those 1.5 inch holes, they poured a slurry of mortar into it, and then they insert these 1-inch stainless steel pieces of rebar into it. And then as they carve, they cut right through them, and that pins it. And then he says, we know it'll never fall off. We know for a fact it won't ever break or anything.
Good.
And they've even used smaller pieces, like 3/8 inch diameter rebar, for small pieces that have come off while they've been carving it, kind of just fallen off. So they've pinned them, and then they'll finish carving out with a torch and stuff in areas, some spots. They closed the gates on us, but I'd like you to come over here. Yeah, right there's a good point. You can see over there, you see them cut marks up there? And then right straight down below us is a place they torched it. Those cut marks were done with a new saw, and we're going to walk out a little further here in a second. But what that saw does is it makes those horizontal cuts in that about an inch apart on each one of those. And then all they have to do is go down through there and break it off with a hammer. That saw will get them within 1/4 inch of the final carving. Then all they have to do is, like they've done right below you here, and use the torch. And they're done. Except for maybe some cosmetic work to do. Okay? So this right here is done.
Huh.
Let's go out here a little further and I'll show you the saw. They've been leaving this gate open, but they'll probably leave it open on the weekend.
And people go down there?
Yep.
No, I'm not.
Like last Saturday I had some.
My God, last week we were all out today on this thing, and I go, no, I can't.
You could actually walk, somebody could walk up by we walked up all the way around to the front of the finger.
Oh, I would never do that.
Here's 2 of the saws. There's one that's over there and there's one here. That framework that those saws are sitting on were designed by 2 of the carvers, Jesse and Tommy. They designed and built those frames. It's called a rail. The saw motor is the same motor as that other cable saw that uses the same motor. What these will do is they cut them lines in it like you see, and they've already done that here and used the torch a little bit. Okay? They've actually, that's what's cut these contours in his hand and finger right here. Okay? Tom Wilson, one of the other tour guides, and I believe that this finger and this hand will be done by the 1st of the year. Completed. Okay? But as that saw is cutting, it has to be mounted to the carving using GPS coordinates, and the way I was explained to me is that it will actually, as it's cutting along, it will actually go up and come down for a contour and cut within that 1/4 inch.
Ooh.
Mr. McNulty, he's one of the engineers. He told me one day inside the Welcome Center, he says, Bill, he says, these new saws we have, and they got these in February. He was telling me this in March. He says what these saws are going to do, he says they're cutting what used to take them 7 days to do, they can do in 7 hours.
Oh, wow.
He says it takes longer to mount the framework to the mountain using GPS because it has to be exact than it does to actually make the cuts. And the saw blades are either 32 inches or they're like the one over here to your left, or they're 64 inches in diameter. It's absolutely amazing what they're doing right now.
So the saw is actually controlled up and down movement by GPS
and computer.
So it's kind of like a bulldozer that uses the GPS for the blade?
Yep. I share because I'm former Air Force. I share that it's almost like train following on an airplane.
Okay.
Yep. But you're right. Just like a bulldozer or a road grader, when they're using that GPS on the road graders to move that blade automatically.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I hope it's not like our GPS that says you have arrived at your destination on the left.
Even though the saw's going like that. You've arrived at your destination and you're sitting on the end of the finger. I don't think so.
That finger might go another way.
You'd be going, Houston, we have a problem. Now let me share a story about this hand and this finger. Well, we all know, probably we all know, maybe not, that Crazy Horse himself was asked the question, where's your land now? He points to the Black Hills of South Dakota and he says, my land is where my dead lie buried. Hence the title of the carving. Okay? Well, my supervisor, Terry Garushi, when he did my certification for me to be a van driver, I was doing my my certification tour up here, and he took over my tour, which was okay. That didn't bother me. So I learned a lot from Mr. Garushi. I should say Colonel. Anyway, he told me they brought a map and a compass up here and set it on the finger and sighted down the finger to see what the carving was pointing towards. Because you got to remember, the mountain lies how it is. You just can't change the direction and say, yeah, we want it to point that way. You know, we want it to point right at that tree over there. Okay, which tree? Well, the map and the compass points directly to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, which lies approximately 70 miles off the tip of his finger right to that valley, or that dip in the skyline over there. Where in 1890 occurred the Wounded Knee Massacre, where over 300 men, women, and children were massacred by the